Okay, I think we are about to start. Yep, I think we're live. Okay. Hi guys, how are you? I'm Chris.
I'm Angela.
And welcome back to our Dinosaur Omelet Live tonight. Let me fix this camera just a hair. We're still working on the iPhone. I don't think I'm ever going to get a decent setup. But hi guys, welcome. So tonight we're going to be talking about poultry illness and injury, some common stuff. If you check out the, what do you call it? The description, I put a bunch of PDF stuff, and I just made an infographic today about poultry illnesses. It lists, I guess, the 5 most common, 5 or 6 illnesses that we're going to be discussing tonight, along with a couple others. Would you like to offer any info?
Not at the moment. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty much going to talk about things to educate and encourage people to look into this stuff themselves as well, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I got to give the disclaimer. I may look like a veterinarian, but I'm not. And this is not veterinary advice. This is just some general information from non-veterinaries. Ding, 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 ding. So really important. And seriously though, with your animals, if you're seeing illness and you're concerned about it, the worst vet to go to is Facebook, because you get 6,000. Everybody's always on there. If you watch, do you see this? You get like 15 different people giving conflicting information on the same basic thing. Should my chicken be drinking water? No, yes, no, but with it, like, so don't go to Facebook for too much information. You do get some qualified, intelligent people on there, but you may get misled if you don't know, and it's easy to get misled by information.
Yeah, and if you do, then there are, if you do go to Facebook, there are groups that are focused specifically on health in poultry, or vet care, that kind of thing. I would look there for more like medical advice sort of thing.
Yeah, and if you're new here, welcome. Please hit the old sub button and the little dingy bell, and that'll warn you when we're about to do something. We do a lot of educational videos on here. Like, the goal with these videos is to, get you guys involved, make you feel a little comfortable approaching people like, we're normal. I mean, weird, but normal. So you can ask questions and get real-time feedback, because we're a small channel, so we can do that right now, which is great.
Yeah.
And we really enjoy teaching people, and we do a lot of education with our customers. So information is extremely liberating. You can do so much with the more you know. So we like to do information in easy to digest, packets, easy to digest presentations, so you gather the information and you can learn it and not have to have it all go in one ear, out the other. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So today we're talking about common poultry illnesses. I made a little cheat package for myself, but I think we've dealt with most of these except for one of them, Merrick's.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to start off. So this is for quail illness and chicken illness. So the thing with, because we are a quail hatchery and we deal with a lot of, quail hobbyists or animal husbandry, people who are raising quail and chickens too. But the avian or poultry illnesses are quite common, and they can go from one species to the next. So you may have chickens will carry disease, and they can transmit it over to the quail. That's why we advise not to keep them close together.
Yeah, not in the same enclosure, and also, like Christopher said, close together. It is good to keep them separated, because chickens are a bigger bird and they are hardier internally. They're hardy, a hardier bird. Quail, they are hardy as far as they heal very fast from injury. They are adaptable with temperature and environment, but internally, if they become sick or have a parasite or something like that, they don't handle it well because they have such a small body. So,
yes, indeed. All right. Oh, and Kelly came in at the beginning. Hello again, Kelly, if you're still listening. Thanks for stepping in. So the first illness I want to talk about is the one that I guess, especially if you're new to poultry, is scary because it sounds scientific. It's coccidiosis. Coccidiosis. All right. I think most of you guys, if you have any experience with birds, you're familiar with this.
Particularly if you have birds that live on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even if you have them, quail perhaps, in a hutch, if you have bedding material that is soiled or it's just not clean, then even in a hutch off the ground with soiled, gross bedding, you may run into this.
Yeah. So the thing that's cool about disease, oh, what do you mean? Disease cool? The thing that's cool about disease is that it's everywhere. So coccidiosis is really everywhere. The issue with disease, again, I'm not a vet, but this is general knowledge, is the load, the viral load or the bacterial load, whether or not the organism is going to make your animal sick. So coccidiosis, that could be introduced by, well, one of the things we always suggest, of course, if you're getting a new chicken, is keep them isolated from your other birds, the birds you had. You're bringing a new bird in, you want to keep them, same with quail, you want to keep them quarantined because these animals are coming from their own micro ecosystem, and the ecosystem they're coming from may have a very different, what do you call it, soil and conditions in their environment. They may be carrying pathogens that they're hardy to because they've been eating them and getting used to them, but they can take a higher load. And maybe if you go into a new hutch, right, with one of these hardy birds that's been eating all these disease things out there,
like organisms, pecking the ground,
they may be able to transmit it. So, and vice versa. You could bring you may bring a bird into an environment where microbiome, right? The biome, right? I'm sorry, I'm glad we have a scientist out there. Yeah. I have Lyme's disease. I forget half the things under the sun. What else was I saying? Oh, and when you bring, and vice versa, when you're bringing a chicken to the environment, or whatever.
Yeah, and then also, I mean, it could be the animal may be completely healthy, but for any living creature, a transition, moving, even humans, being in a new environment is stressful. So stress is something that can suppress their immune system, and if their immune system is suppressed, now they're more susceptible to potentially getting ill or contracting something at the new place. So it is important to quarantine and separate for a period of time to observe and make sure they're not being stressed by other flock mates or covey mates that they're going into. And then, then they'll be more relaxed, prepared to be integrated.
Right. Okay. So how does your chicken get coccidiosis? So coccidiosis is a protozoa. It's a parasitic protozoa, and the chickens are milling around, pecking in the ground and eating all day. Well, wouldn't you know it? Where they're eating also happens to be their toilet many times. So you're getting a concentration. If the coccidiosis is prevalent or present, it can be deposited in large quantities in a central area. So you're going to find a common theme with preventing illness is cleanliness, right?
Proper management, yep.
Right, keeping things clean, cleaning out your coop, disinfecting stuff, especially in spring when you buy new coops that were used, spray them down, get them bleached out and clean them, because that's called a fomite. It's a non-biologic that carries organisms and you can transport them in, and that's very common, and that's why there's a lot of biosecurity measures. Am I talking too fast? If I'm talking too fast, tell me to slow down. I talk fast.
Okay.
So a fomite, or just a transmission vector. If we don't have people coming here, people always ask, can we come visit? Can we come visit? We love to, but just like with bringing chicken A to the different farm, they can bring in disease. Well, when you're walking from the farm with your boots or your shoes or even your gloves, you may be picking up pathogens that the animals are hardy to over at farm A, transport them to farm B, and then kill everybody. And that's not good.
Or infect.
Or infect everybody. So there was a question here. This is key information that I needed to hear. Thank you very much. It says, this is from way deep inside. I don't know what the real name is. Everybody's got these screen names. I know you've been on here before.
He's off looking at
I'm looking at our second
to
screen
see
over
the comments in a larger way than our tiny phone.
Yeah, I'm glad this information is useful. That's the whole point of this stuff. We want to get you guys easy to understand stuff that you can use. So that was a brief description. So what's happening in the dirty environment? Chickens are crapping everywhere, and you have a buildup of what's called oocysts. They're like little eggs. It's where little protozoa are hardy and resistant from getting killed. And they gobble them up. And what happens is they start getting accumulated
The
in there.
chickens are eating them.
Yeah, I'm not gobbling them up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very desperate. But the chickens are ingesting them, and they do develop a hardiness. So exposure develops a hardiness.
The chickens do.
Yes, the chickens are developing a hardiness, but you don't want to just hope they all stay hardy. You want to keep the area clean, like cleaning the coop, right? But so these little...
You may have, within a flock or a covey, of people who are not familiar with quail, covey is the group of quail, and flock would be the chickens. But anyway, there may be members within that group that are hardier than others, and so some of them might be a little bit more delicate or sensitive for whatever reason. Even could it be a genetic thing?
You could have an outbreak and you just think one person or one chicken's sick, but could have multiple birds carrying it.
Yeah.
Like asymptomatic. Did I cut you off? Did you finish?
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
So again, it's a little protozoa gets in, and it's called a parasitic protozoa because with coccidiosis, the protozoas, they go into the chicken's intestines. That's where they live. That's where they thrive. And they're eating what? The
intestinal lining.
Yeah, the intestinal lining. So what happens then? What are the symptoms of this illness? This is important because this is what you're looking for in your chickens.
Yeah, and again, also your quail, if your quail are on the ground, or if they've been exposed to soiled bedding and then you notice a behavioral change, the first symptoms that you probably would notice is low energy. They may look a little sleepy-ish. They're not as, you'll be able to see the difference between the one and the others. The others will be energetic, moving around.
Because they have such a high metabolism, especially with quail, and then they're not absorbing their nutrients because their intestinal lining is being compromised.
And this will be both chickens, poultry, the poultry across the board, the different types. They'll get lethargic. They might fluff their feathers. And some of them, you may not even notice this behavior at all. So some, like we mentioned already, some birds may be a little more delicate than others. So you might see these type of symptoms early on. Whereas other ones that are hardier, you might not see this at all. So you want to look at everything. You want to be observing droppings, their manure. You may see like pink fleshy stuff in their manure, and that if you do see that, you don't always see this, but if you do see that, then they definitely do have coccidiosis, and that's, well, I would say there's a very high likelihood they do.
We're not vets.
We're not vets. But typically that's a sign that pieces of the intestinal lining is passing through into their manure.
Not good.
No, not good at all. And like Christopher said, they're not going to be able to absorb nutrients.
So you're going to have weight loss.
The bird.
You'll see them losing weight, the lethargy.
And depending on the species, like if it's the quail or if it's more in the chicken world, if it's more like delicate type of breeds, like the bantams, the mini chickens, like silkies, because they're small bodied, like the quail are small bodied. It is important to watch behavior and look for these things because smaller birds, they can succumb to like a faster a deterioration. Yeah. And they can die. Yes. So you want to watch them.
And the quail, so the quail versus chicken, as far as illnesses go, we rarely ever see illnesses in quail because the quail are not being exposed to the environment. Now, the chickens aren't just dealing with natural, like just stuff that's coming from them, like just circulating. They're also getting environmental organisms coming in from wild birds and stream runoff and other water sources and things coming down. So they're being exposed to many more organisms, but again, they become hardy. You know, they're hardier birds. And that's why we talk about all the time raising quail in a chicken environment. Is it okay? I mean, people do that, and the quails yes, some are getting hardier, but it can also be damaging to them because they're smaller critters, they have smaller systems, and they can be overrun.
And it does, you know, it depends on your goals. If you want to make sure, like, all your birds, if you have quail and chickens and you want to make sure that everybody's healthy and perhaps you want to make sure that they're as productive as possible, then separating them really is, it's ideal, so then you can make sure, you know, there isn't going to be this cross-contamination. Now, some people, like Christopher mentioned, do keep them together, and maybe it's not such a big deal if the quail stop laying eggs because of the stress in their body.
Somebody said they're in a biology class? Hold on.
Oh, I can't see the comments. The comments are all, like, overlapping.
I'm going to read it on my little computer here. I'm learning a lot. It's been a while since I was in biology class.
Oh, yeah.
So I have this on.
We're not trying, we don't want to cause, like, any fear or anything like that. This is educational.
Simple.
And
it's
we
not,
want,
real
it's
complex.
Important. The reason why we started with coccidiosis, by the way, is
it's the
because
scariest one.
It's so common.
Yeah. Scary as in, it's a scary sounding name.
Yeah, but it's so common, and it's treatable, it's preventable,
Good
for the most part.
So how do we treat it?
But yeah, it's you want to be educated, and you want to know what to look for. What are you seeing? What are you noticing? What does that mean?
Yeah, so coccidiosis you treat with, again, not a vet, but common treatment is what's called a coccidostat, and I think the chemical name or the medical name, amprolium, which you'll often see as Corid. Mm-hmm. Is that what they sell in the stores? The Corid?
Yeah, there's different versions of it. There's a powdered concentrate that you put in the water, and then it's a treatment for like 5 to 7 days, new water every day. There's a pelleted form. I think there's a liquid form.
That's what you talk to your vet about and do a little research and understand it. But the way the amprolium works is it keeps the organism inside the chicken, the coccidiosis, from ingesting or absorbing the nutrients from the cell walls or the cell from the chicken's, what do you call it, intestines. So they can't reproduce, and eventually they all croak out. And it treats them. How long does it take to treat them with that anyway?
Usually about 5 to 7 days. It really depends on the case. If it's not, too severe, then maybe less. If your bird is not in a good way, then you might want to go even longer than 7 days. You do need to be careful, though. It's been a little bit since I've read this, but I do think that medicine, it does take care of the coccidiosis, but it may not, like if you're giving them also like electrolytes or something, at the same time, the medicine, I believe it may make it difficult for the bird to absorb the other types of medicines or nutrients as well. So that's why you don't want to you just want to watch how long you're doing it. Read the package.
I say call the vet.
Yeah.
We always go to that. Again, this is informational stuff. Yeah. So I hope that was as easy to understand as possible. Coccidiosis is very common. People deal with it. If you have chickens, you're probably going to deal with it at some point. But it's not something to be scared of. But you want to identify an illness as soon as possible, isolate the animal if you can, and treat.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why we mentioned early in this topic about prevention in as far as bedding material, management of material, or the flooring, the dirt and such, is because coccidiosis is very hardy in the, what has it called?
The oocyst, sporulated form. It's got like a shell around it.
Yeah, and it can take like a year to have it be removed from an area. And some treatments, like chemical treatments.
Do you use any natural chicken treatments? Oh, that's that nice lady. I forgot your name because I was chatting with her about our graphics. Natural treatment. So we were talking about
the copper
sulfate. And copper sulfate. We don't use the copper sulfate.
I was looking into copper sulfate. That is a more natural, environmentally friendly thing to use, and it's short use term. It's like 2 to 3 days. It is beneficial. You'd have to look into it more. We haven't personally used it ourselves. The reason why Corid, there's some concern of people using it a lot, because there's people who have like large bird facilities with a lot of animals that they they just treat them on, on a scheduled thing where they're just constantly kind of treating them on rotation to prevent coccidiosis. And if the treated water is getting dumped constantly, like into the environment, that's not really the best thing. But yeah, there are other methods.
That was Susan from New Mexico. Thanks again for your message that you sent to us on the Facebook. I'm glad that the print stuff we send out or put on there you found useful.
Oh yeah.
All right. Way deep inside. I clean my quail housing with hydrogen peroxide.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that's good.
That'll do it. That'll clean it.
I use natural for my ducks and rabbits. Good. Yeah, that's good. So the coccidiosis, it can stay in the bedding for quite a while. If the bedding is soiled and not cleaned, then you're going to risk a higher chance of the coccidiosis developing and being in the environment. If you keep it clean.
Wayne was asking about way deep inside. Asking about any other cleaning methods besides, I guess, the hydrogen peroxide. So we use I guess sometimes a light bleach solution on some surfaces, like we'll cut it.
Yeah, it sounds like so it depends on what your setup looks like. If you have a hutch that you can actually remove the animals, there's no dirt or anything, and you can really clean it well, then
when I'm adding
that's easier to remove. That's easier to sanitize.
So if we have a building that I'm basically sterilizing it because bleach is killing everything. Mm-hmm. So I'll add a bleach solution and cut it down with water and put it in a spray bottle and spray the whole thing down.
And then I would let it dry, and then I would then wet it down with water again.
Way deep inside is Steven. Hello, Steven. Sorry about that. It's these internet names. You don't want to tell who you are because you get weird stalkers online.
But if we're talking then about chickens and they're on the ground, then that is more of a deep litter system, or it can be trickier if people don't have a deep litter system for their chickens. There are mats that horse stall mats, if you wanted to be have the ability to sanitize your area really well, you could put something down under a deep litter system and then, periodically remove the litter and then sanitize the mat and then put fresh litter down. It just depends on your setup. Determines how you treat it.
All right.
The easiness of it.
We did a while on coccidiosis, so I think we are going to roll on to, I guess you can talk about bumblefoot.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Pododermatitis. So the medical name for bumblefoot is pododermatitis. If you look online, if you're looking online to look at an illness and you know it is a common name, maybe like wryneck or bumblefoot, and you're looking online at a veterinarian manual, you want to know the medical name to look up the injury or illness, because the common names, you're not going to find them as easily. So just go to Google and Google common medical name for blank, whatever, wryneck, bumblefoot, whatever the illness is, and it should give you the appropriate term for your research. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is bumblefoot? So this goes to the quail. It's quail and chicken.
Yeah,
coccidiosis is prevalent in the chicken, not so much in quail. So going back to quail.
It's prevalent depending on how you keep them.
Coccidiosis?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to talk about that anymore. We've been talking about it for half an hour.
Bumblefoot.
Bumblefoot. Pretty common.
It's common knowledge as far as people hearing about it. Bumblefoot, and you can fill in past what I say. Generally, if the bird is walking on a rough material, it could be if it's in a hutch, maybe the flooring is rough or has some burrs on it.
Somebody keeps a chicken in a cage all the time, walking around on a cage floor.
Or even a chicken roosting on the roost maybe has splinters in it, or it's it's overly rough, or maybe the ramp that they go up and down their coop has a nail or something that their foot could get cut. That's pretty much. So then an infection.
It introduces.
It's an entryway for an infection, and it's usually the feet. and the pad will, if left unchecked, usually people will then notice that if the bird may or may not be limping, but they usually get like a scab, a raised scab type thing on their feet.
There must be a delay. Robert Wood was asking if quail get bumblefoot. So yes.
They do.
Yes.
Yep, ducks, turkeys, and poultry.
Any of these poultry walking around, especially if they're walking on a hard surface regularly. So the thing with quail, because you're raising them in a hutch and they usually are going to have a wire floor, we would recommend using a coated vinyl 1/2-inch hardware cloth, because that's going to have a smooth surface to it. They can still get an abrasion on another surface, but you're really, really going to limit the likelihood of an abrasion. Now, the bumblefoot with the poultry, that can occur from cutting themselves on some environmental thing.
And also you can use the regular wire hardware cloth, but it's advisable to lightly sand it to remove the burrs. But if you want to prevent it, the vinyl is best.
Yeah, so now Bob said, luckily he's never had bumblefoot. Good. Yeah, sand down the cage if you can. But if they do get it, there are ways to address it and treat it.
Yeah. So usually inside that scab, there's, what would you call it, a corn? There's like a hard, I don't know what the technical term is for it.
Oh, that tissue. It can become abscess too if it's not addressed.
But usually the treatment is you have to open the scab and remove the hard, for lack of a better word, corn. I don't remember what it's called. That's in there, and in removing it, then it's able to heal. If that's not removed, it won't heal. It'll just continue. But then you put a light, a poultry-friendly type of medicine or just wound care thing, treatment, and just keep it clean as best as possible. Quail heal very fast. However, so if you do have to do treatment for bumblefoot on any of the birds, especially quail, it's not like a fun thing to do. Quail are small birds. They are energetic. They're moving around a lot, and it's a process to get them to heal and everything. A bigger bird is easier. A chicken, a duck, they're easier to tend to because the foot is bigger, and usually it's just easier to contain the bird. But either way, it's a process to help them heal. It takes time. It's not really fun to do. So prevention is the best thing. Yes.
Right. So bumblefoot's it's fairly common. You'll recognize it pretty rapidly. You're going to notice the bird kind of hobbling around or limping on one foot because it is, it causes some pain. But you address it as quickly as possible. Add your antibiotic cream.
Yeah, you make sure to look into there are poultry sprays, wound care treatments that you can use specifically for poultry.
Okay, excellent. Moving along. So we're going to talk about a issue that we always talk. I'm sorry, I sound a little hoarse. I sound like the mafia today. What are you doing over there? I don't know. I had a cold. I've been breathing in particulates. Ooh, what a great segue. I've been breathing in particulates, and your birds will do the same thing and develop respiratory illness, right? So we're going to talk about respiratory illness and what different kind of respiratory causal factors might evolve in your hutch or coop system. So we always talk about this with keeping things clean. So talk about the easy stuff. What's causing the respiratory illness? The same thing that's causing a lot of the other illnesses.
Well, a dirty housing, dirty coop, dirty shelter, improper ventilation. So there's not enough airflow coming in.
That was a big thing we talked about. Sorry to cut you off. It was a big thing we were talking about recently because it was getting cold, and intuitively people think, oh, I got to seal up my hutch or seal my coop up. Don't do that, because then you're preventing ventilation.
Go ahead. And the thing is, when there's a lot of manure buildup or when there's manure in the area, it's acidic. So if there's not good ventilation, then that's gonna go into their breathing air, and obviously that's not good for them to breathe in. Also for chickens, it's more an issue for chickens than it is for quail, because quail, like, they need a lot of airflow. Chickens, you want to make sure that it's not drafty, because if it's drafty is different than ventilation. Ventilation, usually it's up at the top and it's gonna allow airflow, but draftiness is like there's maybe cracks around the structure and there's just like excessive airflow, and it can chill them. It can challenge them when they're trying to keep warm in the winter. So draftiness, look into that further if you want to, ventilation versus draftiness for chickens, because that's important. But if the air they're breathing is not ventilated properly and the bedding material isn't kept clean, that is perfect environment for them to have potential risk for respiratory illness.
Yeah, and without proper ventilation, I know this sounds like, why are you being so redundant? Because there's a lot of things you may not realize, especially if you're new. Without proper ventilation, so the animals are constantly breathing, we always talk about this, and they're expelling moisture, and that's going to build up too. And the moisture that's already there is not going to have an outlet to evaporate and to escape. So, I don't know about you, but bacteria love moisture and warmth. So you want to keep it clean, like she's saying, and clean out the coops regularly. I mean, that's really the biggest way to prevent most of those respiratory illnesses, is to keep everything clean.
And then another,
doesn't need to be spotless.
Right, just tidy it. Have a schedule where you're gonna keep it up. Another thing too with the respiratory. So with birds in general, the one of the most like common illnesses is respiratory. So if their immune system gets suppressed through stress, that's another easy way. Whatever.
Yes.
If we talked earlier, if you're getting a new bird, you're moving a bird, that'll be stressful if they're moving from location to location, or something drastically changes in their environment, or maybe a predator is harassing them at night, that sort of thing. So you just want to make sure they're, as calm as they can be.
So there's different organisms that you're going to have to deal with. I don't want to get too deep into it, but like Mycoplasma gallisepticum, or that causes chronic respiratory disease. It's pretty common. Avian influenza. So avian influenza, everybody knows about that because it was in the news. They were culling entire poultry houses. It became a big political issue. There's a whole bunch of stuff with it. Avian influenza, so there's high pathogenic avian influenza, which means it spreads real quick and it's pretty virulent. And there's low pathogenic avian influenza, which means it's not going to be as contagious and it's probably not going to wipe everybody out. They may even be asymptomatic. So with these avian influenzas, they're kind of hard just to look at and differentiate. That's why they take samples and test them to see what they're carrying. The high pathogenic avian influenza, though, like H5N1, that was concerned because it could jump off and jump into another species who is more susceptible to that mutation. So that was kind of a neat thing. I don't know. I like the old spooky disease stories, and that one kind of is, it's a little scary if you know about it. But again, where's that coming from? Could be the environment, right? It was the birds, and that's the same with a lot of these other issues. Other animals in the area are carrying their own pathogens in. Like I was saying before we started this, it's getting into springtime, so migratory animals, like we had last year, I think with ducks, or was it geese? They were bringing in disease from another area. So, it doesn't need to be some guy on an airplane. It can be a little ducky on his own wings carrying a disease from down south up here.
Speaking of wild birds, I don't think we're going to mention this, but wild birds tend to be like Tweety birds. They tend to be the causal factor for like mites and lice. And that's just something that's difficult to prevent. It's if you have like quail in a hutch, quail in a hutch is like they're protected, and it's not common that you have
rare.
issues.
You're going to have problems
Health
with quail on a
issues.
hutch.
It's really bumblefoot you want to make sure that they don't have. But poultry on the ground, in a coop with a run or free, whatever you do, they're going to be exposed to wild birds, because the wild birds are going to be attracted to like feed that might get on the ground, or maybe insects that are attracted to the feces, the manure of the chickens, and they'll carry lice and mites. So that's just something that you'll want to make sure to treat, even if you don't see evidence of it. It's good to treat the coop periodically, like once or twice a year, just to make sure that's prevented.
Yeah, so I'm going to finish up with respiratory illnesses. Other stuff they're going to get from their feces, E. coli. We don't want them breathing that in. And so when the bedding and everything, it's drying out and they're walking back and forth with it, starts to become aerate. It goes up in the air and they're breathing in these particles, feather dust and other dusts in a dirty coop. It starts to irritate their lungs. And like she was saying, that can compromise their immune system. And now they're going to be more susceptible to an actual infection, not just irritation.
And the chickens, for example, they do in a coop before you let them out, or before they're released in the morning, they'll scratch around, look for things to peck while they're in there, or they might flap their wings, and that's gonna, if there's the dust, there will be dust because they produce their feathers shed. So if that's the dust, they're breathing that in, that could be a problem. And quail, they love flapping their little wings and moving around, and if you have material for them to do sand baths and stuff, they're going to be making dust. So
very cool. All right, I'm going to move on to a disease now, the one that you may have heard of, which is Marek's disease. We've heard of that. Marek's disease. If you distribute birds like chickens, and we get asked this question, do you vaccinate for Marek's disease? People do ask that, and it's a concern. If you're familiar with chickens, you may know about it. What is Marek's disease? Marek's disease is a type of gallid herpes virus. Okay? And what do we know about herpes virus? They stay in your system. Okay? You can get sick with this, but the virus is in your system. So what does that mean? If your chicken has Marek's and he gets sick, but then recovers, he's still going to be shedding this virus. All right? So he's now a contaminated bird.
Carrier.
Yeah, you have a carrier now. He's been contaminated. And the way this disease is transmitted is through dander, basically. Their fur, not their fur. Their feathers, their feather cells, I guess, follicles, when they're coming off of their body, they carry this virus in the air. The birds breathe it in. And now they may catch it, again, depending on viral load, right? And how's it treated? Like I said, it's basically just a vaccination. This is more of a concern. I'm not going to tell you guys, again, not a vet, but it's a big concern in giant poultry houses because it's extremely contagious. All right. And what happens when they get it? They get tumors, they get paralysis, like they're not tumors all over the body, they get organ tumors. They'll get paralysis. Usually it'll be one side or the other paralysis. The eyes start clouding, lethargy, croaking. Not good. So that's a big concern for a commercial poultry house. They got X amount of chickens, a huge investment in these birds. And so they do get their animals vaccinated, of course, because it's a big investment. And if they get that disease, and it's probably required in most areas that they do have that vaccination. I'm not familiar with that industry, like major poultry industry with the big production houses, but I'm assuming there's a bunch of biosecurity measures they have to take. And speaking of biosecurity, that's the important thing. Like I mentioned earlier, bringing in contamination from contaminated tools, clothing, or what they call fomites, other non-living material. If you guys are fishermen, if you go to some lakes or rivers, they got a scrub bucket. You've seen those, right? So why do they have the scrub bucket? Because these streams carry these invasive species of mussels and algae, so you don't want to transport them from one stream to the other. So the natural resource people, they put those decontamination wash basins for you to scrub down your boots before you get into the water, so you don't transport an invasive organism all over the place, right?
So, and speaking of that, we kind of mentioned this earlier. If anyway, so if you're visiting somebody's property, maybe a family member has chickens or a friend and you want to go see them, you're visiting and you're looking at their animals and you're walking around, look at the chickens, blah, blah, and then you go home. Remember, your shoes need to either be changed or cleaned if you're using those same ones to go and visit your chickens.
It's the same when the kids come back from school and a week later the entire house is sick.
Yeah.
You know, it's just disease transmission. It's pretty easy to do. I mean, disease, you build up a hardiness to different illnesses, obviously, but you don't want to see all of your animals perish because of some simple precaution you could have taken. So, you know, do take precautions. If it hasn't happened, you know.
You don't have to be paranoid or anything like
I
that.
wouldn't be
but these
paranoid.
are just simple things.
It's just a layer of protection. That's all. All right, we're almost through because we're going to do coccidiosis, Merrick's, bumblefoot, respiratory illness, wry neck, or what's called torticollis. Is that correct? Yeah, tortoise means twisted. Collis means neck. It's a Latin term, torticollis, but that's a medical term if you're looking it up. Otherwise, wry neck, or they call it stargazing because the chicken's like this.
Yeah, they'll twist their head. Sometimes they'll twist them all the way down to the ground, and then their head will be twisted, so like they're looking up.
Now this is relatively common if you guys hatch, if you're incubating quail or chicken chicks or duck chicks, I guess too, right? You could see a wry neck. So what is wry neck caused from? Do you remember? It's a
vitamin deficiency.
Yeah.
And there are a few other things too, but that's the most common.
Most common is a nutrient issue, which is vitamin E and selenium, like a vitamin E deficiency.
It could also be a genetic thing with that particular bird. I would not say that this is a common thing. Like if you're hatching, you're not, you know, there's no need to be like, oh my gosh, or my chick's gonna have wry neck. Like, calm down, it's okay. But once in a while you might see one or like two. It's just their little body isn't absorbing the nutrients properly. And this could actually happen in an adult or an older bird as well if for some reason they're not absorbing the nutrients that they're needing. Yeah. Now there is something that gets confused for wry neck is where, for example, silkies, because they have that, you know, they have a fluffy feathers up there, but a lot of times they have what's called a vaulted skull, and what actually happens, like when they're chicks, it looks like they have little helmets on, but the top of their skull is actually not fully closed. So because of that, it's important to make sure if you have silkies or you want to get silkies, that they're paired with calm flock mates. Because you have to make sure they don't get pecked on the head. Chickens peck on the head. So sometimes if a chicken gets bopped on the head somehow, you might see them put their head down and they'll be backing up, and they can't go forward, it seems like. And that could just be, it's not wry neck, but people might get confused because their head is down. And their postures.
So it's an injury related.
Yeah, and there's different methods to helping them with that, but often giving them added nutrients helps them recover from that.
Yeah, the last thing to mention, I guess, about wry neck, it's pretty common, it's pretty simple. Take the animal who is suffering and isolate him from the other critters. Because the other critters, you know, he's already having a difficult time eating, and he's already under stress, and those animals can cause further injury.
I would say, though, depending on the breed, we have silkies, so I'm very familiar with the silkies. They're very docile and gentle-tempered, and if you have to isolate one, it is a good idea to give it a buddy that is another silkie or a calm, docile flock mate that would be safe to keep with the isolated bird, because they're social creatures, and sometimes an isolated bird who is maybe injured or sick for some reason, it can just decide to give up on life. And
that's not good.
No, it's not, because they're just so sweet-tempered. They're not like these robust personalities.
They're not from the streets.
So having a friend helps them like, oh yeah, oh you're eating, oh let me eat too, and they'll kind of mimic and do what the other one's doing. It's like encouragement, buddy system.
Yeah, the good news though is Rhineck is treatable. You're going to give it supplements, vitamin E, selenium supplement, and you can see improvement within a day, 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it's a fixable problem.
Sometimes it takes a little longer, sometimes it's super fast.
Inexperienced people who haven't maybe hatched a lot or seen this before, it looks real disturbing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of scary because they're all twisted in there, and you're like, oh my God. And you're like, what am I going to do? But that's what it is. Okay, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a vet.
Typically, I mean, you know, yeah, not a vet, but typically it's a matter of helping them ingest the nutrients, and oftentimes you can get electrolytes or something that has the vitamins that they need. You can just mix in the water, and then you have to manually, you know, give water to the bird.
But we're not vets.
Because it can't.
Not vets. You know, it's kind of funny. You on the internet, like online, you don't give medical advice, and you always have to do these disclaimers. I mean, I could tell you, don't drink gasoline; it's not good for you. But I got to tell you, I'm not a doctor.
Oh my gosh.
All right, moving on. So, yeah, this is some pretty good information. Let's talk about, because we're almost finished. I only have a small list. This is something we see in quail, prolapse. Prolapsing. What is
And
this?
chickens.
Yeah, you see it.
Any, yeah.
I guess we see it in quail because
Egg
we have a
layers.
million quail. It's an egg layers issue.
Yeah, so what happens is the muscles when they're laying an egg. So those muscles that are in the rear end when they're laying an egg, the internal parts come out with the egg, and it's obviously very painful. And main reasons for this is the muscles are weak. Maybe the egg is very large. With hens, quail, or chickens, whatever, it's important to make sure what you're feeding them as adults when they're laying eggs, of age to lay eggs, that they're getting calcium.
One thing too is mishandling of the quail,
Mm-hmm.
squeezing the little quail.
The calcium will strengthen those egg-laying muscles, and it's also good for the eggshell itself. It's not just that the eggshell is stronger, because if you're not giving them calcium, you're going to end up with eggs without a shell. It's just going to be the membrane and the yolk and everything inside. The reason why it's not just that you want the shell to be on the egg is that the reason why you want the shell to be strong is that you don't want her, when she's laying this egg, you don't want that egg to burst inside of her because there's no shell. So it's important that there's calcium. In a layer feed, if you're feeding a layer feed, it should have the calcium. It's about 3.5%.
We start mixing calcium into our quail feed at what, 6 weeks?
At 6 weeks, we start transitioning them.
So
with
it builds
higher
up their,
protein.
it helps their muscles, like
Yeah.
it helps their home.
And then,
area
like Christopher mentioned, when handling quail female hens that are mature, they're at the point where they're going to start laying eggs, then you want to make sure, it's very important not to squeeze them. So they might start fluttering and like flapping their wings, and our instinct is like, don't get away. That pressure can blow make her prolapse.
Especially if you guys have like little kids and you're doing the quail with the little kids, that's really an intuitive thing for a youngster to do, is to hold them tighter so they don't get away. Mm-hmm. So just be observant, and you definitely do not want to make a child feel bad about mishandling an animal, because they do. I mean,
But
it's just
even
part of being a
an
kid.
adult. So just make sure when you're holding them, stay calm. And if their wings get out of your hands and they're flapping their wings, stay calm, because they tire really quickly, the quail. So they'll stop flapping, and then you can, fix your hands and get their wings again. But just make sure you're gently holding her. Like, obviously you don't want her to fly out of your hands, but just don't squeeze.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that does. So we're feeding them calcium, making sure they get calcium, don't mishandle them, and that's pretty much the main issues with prolapsing. Mm-hmm. Lastly, I think we're going to sum it up with talking about one more egg issues when the hen becomes egg-bound. Mm-hmm. You know what this is. You can give the speech. I've been talking too much.
So egg-bound is the egg's not coming out. There's a lot. If if you're watching your hens, if you're familiar with them and you know there should be laying and you see a decrease in eggs, or perhaps you can see there's a bump, like a bulge under the hen, kind of near her vent, like an egg is on its way out, then she may be egg bound, meaning the egg's not coming out. And sometimes it can, you know, work its way out, but other times they may need assistance. And there are different methods to helping a hen have her egg come out. We're not going to go through those different things, but you do have to take care because, again, it is harmful to the bird if the egg bursts in her. That can cause infection and other problems. So, yeah, there are methods that are not complicated to help an egg-bound bird.
And if you're dealing with a lot of animals, you're probably going to see that at some point.
Yeah.
You know, all these stuff is common. I mean, not like avian influenza wiping out an entire flock, but the stuff we're talking about is relatively common, meaning that you're going to see it maybe multiple times, like bumblefoot.
You. Our curled toes were... Sorry, the comments disappear really quick.
Yeah, I'm looking over here at a little screen. Our curled toes common. Actually, I was just going to get into splay leg. I had one more thing to talk about. We can talk about
curled toes are different.
Yeah, I know. So you can talk about curled toes first.
Yeah, curled toes tends to be an issue if when hatching, and it's, you know, different types of birds, not just quail, when hatching, if they're taking too long to hatch. So it is important to monitor your levels of temperature and humidity during the incubation process, and especially humidity when, both are very important, but when they're hatching, because if the temperature fluctuates too much during the incubation part, then it could create a weakened chick. It could make the hatching part take longer. So if the chick is in the shell for too long during the hatching process, there's a high likelihood that the toes will be curled. And you can correct it through taping their feet. It's just preferably you want the hatch to, you know, be the proper duration of time, because then you're gonna have strong chicks.
Yeah, actually, that's good you mentioned that. Somebody was writing, I guess, comment section in one of these videos about the quail taking 20 days, 21 days. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be, like, those offspring are probably going to be weaker, and you're going to have problems.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm sure it looks fine there.
All right, hopefully you heard that. But, yeah, so proper incubation is important to avoid the curled toes. And what was I talking about? Splay legs. Splay legs, another thing with incubation and environment. Yeah, so splay leg, what is that?
Splay leg is when their legs are just like either one or both are going to the sides, or maybe like just different directions. They can't stand up.
Or they're splayed.
And the muscles are weak. They just can't get their legs underneath them. Did you want to say? Well, so one common reason.
Oh, go ahead.
Is when hatching, you want to. It's very important that the material, the surface of the hatching environment is some sort of rough material. It's not smooth. You don't want it to be smooth. If it's rough, then their little feet and tiny claws, but their feet can grip, and then they can they'll be wobbly slightly, but then they'll be able to stand up. And then it doesn't take long for them to strengthen their leg muscles once they get their feet underneath them and they stand up. But if it's smooth, it's just like they're skating. It's going like this, their feet are all over the place, and then these muscles are not strengthening, and then you're going to end up with a bunch of chicks with splay leg. Now,
the cool thing is it's easy to fix.
Mm-hmm.
You can fix that with, what do we use, Band-Aids?
Oh, there's so many different things you can do.
We got to do, there's plenty of videos online. Maybe we'll make one later, but when their legs are splayed apart, you're going to use an adhesive bandage or something to kind of wrap around and...
Google images, because you'll be able to visually see this. You want to arrange their feet so that they're spaced properly if they're standing. And it's important that it's not like they're not too spaced out, that their proper spacing for when they're standing. And then what I do is I just take painter's tape because it's not super sticky, and I'll cut a thin strip, and then I tape, you know, this little leggy, and then I run the tape to this side and tape it, and then I just make sure that all of the adhesiveness between is covered with with tape.
Can you see that? I got a little Band-Aid.
I do recommend that you don't make it thick like that. Make it narrow, because it can affect their joints and how they can bend and move their legs. If they can't really bend their legs well, then when they're trying to get used to standing with it, which they adapt quickly, then they may fall on their face and then not really be able to get. Oh, we're back. I don't know if you guys heard us. We froze. Visually is what we saw. So I was saying, if you do have a chick with splay leg, it's important to take care of it pretty quickly. Maybe not immediately after taking it out of the incubator, because the legs will be swollen. Let them, what's the word for unswell?
Unswell.
Unswell.
From being swole to unswell.
Yeah, and then treat the splay leg then pretty quickly, so that the muscles will.
It rectifies itself. It heals pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right. They adapt because it grows so fast, especially the quail. Mm-hmm. So they heal pretty quickly.
And the chickens do too. The key is quick treatment, or it may be too late for their muscles. So some people even put them in like a little cup, it's a shot glass. So then they're forced to stay in that small space. But depending on the chick and their energy, they might just jump out.
Don't do a shot glass. Just use a little tape method. It doesn't sound fun. All right, I think that about does it. I hope this information was useful to you guys. If so, feel free to share this video, or again, leave comments, whatever you feel. Again, our objective is to offer an interactive venue where we can give out information to help educate people and really introduce, our core philosophy is about making people feel comfortable attempting something to be self-sufficient, learning new skills, and improving the quality of their life through these wonderful things such as quail and chicken and gardening and all that fun stuff. It's a revolution. People are doing this. It's a split. People are either going to live in their iPhones and televisions, and then there's people who are like, you know what, screw that, I want to be happy and work with nature and do lively things. Yeah. So to all of our friends, I'm going to do Romper Room. I saw Steven, I saw Susan. She doesn't remember Romper Room, she's younger than me. And there was Bob, and who else am I leaving out? Oh, Kelly. So thanks for coming in, you guys. And if I forgot anybody, sorry. But yeah, it was really cool doing this. I like this one. This one was fun because I like science.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. Until next time, if you have a suggestion for a video, please let me know. We can do one. All right. We're going to do an incubating one pretty soon. Probably not a live, but we'll do one kind of like a live.
I'm leaning in to look at a question or a comment, but
I am grateful for your knowledgeable videos. I think that's Steven. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, you guys. We'll see you in the future. Take care. It was very nice seeing you.
Bye.